Welcome back to my channel at The Movie Optimist, everybody, where I see the silver lining in even the worst of films. Tonight, I just got done watching the newest film, Captain America: Brave New World. In this film, Sam Wilson has fully embraced the role of Captain America, and it takes place a little while after the events of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. He's essentially working for the government and is like the right-hand man to the president, played by Harrison Ford, who is now taking over the role of Thunderbolt Ross. And he essentially wants Captain America to reassemble the Avengers because after the events of the Eternals, where the Celestial was birthed out of the center of the earth and kind of just left to rot in the middle of the ocean, people find out that the Celestial is actually the home for a very rare metal called adamantium, which is the same metal they use to infuse Wolverine's claws. It's like the strongest metal on the planet, even more so than vibranium. Every country in the entire world wants to fight for this thing and be able to secure it for themselves to use for their own gain, whether that be weaponizing it or whatever the case may be. The President of the United States does not want it to fall into the wrong hands, so he deems this as the appropriate time to reassemble the Avengers because they can do what regular human beings cannot. They could do what the government cannot, and they could stop other foreign invaders from acquiring this metal and using it for themselves. However, before Sam can officially start reassembling the Avengers or finding people worthy of it, there's an assassination attempt on the president, and Sam now has to figure out who is a mole, who's a double agent, who's secretly working for the enemy, and it becomes that political thriller that Winter Soldier kind of set up in the second Captain America film. That being said, I don't want to give too much else away because like all political thrillers, there is the double crosses and the plot twists, and I don't want to give any of that away for you guys because that is part of the excitement of this movie. So let's get into what I thought about this film. And we're going to start off with the bad first and foremost. I knew going into this film that there was going to be reshoots. I am very involved in the comic book culture. I am very involved in movies. I go to the movies 2, 3, 4 times a week. I read up on all the news articles that come out throughout the day, and I knew that this movie had some troubled production. Now, when this movie went into production, it was under Bob Chapek, who was essentially forcing Kevin Feige to mass produce content for Disney Plus and for the movies because they wanted to make as much money as possible. And it kind of stretched Feige out to the point where he was exhausted and couldn't put the full amount of quality into each movie and TV show that he wanted to. And that's where this movie, Captain America: Brave New World, was kind of birthed. And then halfway through it, Bob Chapek was fired and Bob Iger came back in and was like, we need to do some damage control because the MCU is taking a hit. So he allowed Kevin Feige to go back in and not shoot an entirely new movie, but add as much as he could to make it better because it was not doing well in the test screenings originally before they reshot a bunch of stuff. So again, going forward, I knew there was a lot of stuff going into this that was added after the original movie was shot, and a lot of it has to do with Giancarlo Esposito's character. And I'll say this, while watching the movie and knowing that all of his scenes were things that were added in to kind of add a separate villain into it, to add some more exciting scenes in between the bigger action set pieces, it was kind of added to break up the downtime. So instead of you going 20 minutes without some kind of action set piece, you're only going like 10 to 15. I was able to tell where the scenes were artificially placed into the original cut of the movie, but I was with 3 other people that had no idea. So if you're not looking for it, I don't think you're gonna see it unless you're really trying to see like where was the reshoots added in. To me, that being said, I don't think that they were bad. I thought Giancarlo Esposito was really fun to watch all of the 7 minutes that he was in it. He added an extra layer to it, and he did add some extra fight scenes in it between him and Sam Wilson. Hell, I even think it fits into the story as into why Giancarlo Esposito was hired as a character to do something in this movie, because it fits in the overall plot of like the political backstabbing and the political agenda that's in this film. And I don't mean political in a sense of like Democratic, Republican. I mean like bad people are infiltrating our government to try and get closer to this Celestial and the adamantium that's on top of it. I thought it was a lot of fun, but how did it feel seeing it in there? It honestly felt like DLC at the end of a game that you get, but instead of getting the DLC at the end of the game, you download the DLC in the middle of the game and it's sprinkled throughout the remainder of the story, so you're getting the DLC throughout the original campaign and not just, like I said, at the end. That's kind of how it felt. Like DLC that belongs in this world, but it was added after the fact. And I don't personally hate it, but I could see a lot of people that are in the know and did know that this was coming, that it seems a little jarring and like the editing jumps a little bit too frantically between the reshoots and the original cut. Also, I thought the score was pretty underwhelming here. The MCU is known for having great scores in all of their movies, and here it felt a little intrusive. It felt like they hired like a really cheap new up-and-comer composer, and when they were like, hey, this scene needs to be really sad, Instead of making a really sad song, they just played really loud, somewhat sad elevator music. And then the same thing in the action scenes. It just felt like very generic action score. It didn't feel as awe-inspiring as the MCU usually is during heartfelt scenes or triumphant scenes where the hero finally beats the bad guys, or tense scenes when you think the hero is about to get defeated by the bad guy. It all just felt very generic, almost like they just hired some kid to download stuff off of a website like Artlist and make it fit into the movie. It just didn't feel unique and original, and I thought that that kind of brought down a lot of the more heavier scenes that were more heartfelt, that if it had the right score, it would have definitely lifted it from like an 8 to a 10 in terms of how much I was enjoying that scene as a whole. And I thought that the other villain in this movie that I don't want to spoil here, but there is a villain in this that you haven't seen in the trailers, and as much as I liked him and I liked the way he looked, I thought he was really underutilized, even though the thing he was trying to do throughout the entire film is exactly what I wanted to see at the end of this film. I still thought he was totally underutilized and didn't earn what he did at the end of this. Also, I know they hired somebody to come in and reshoot some of the fight scenes. Apparently they were a little unhappy with how the fight scenes looked. They were a little jumbled and all over the place and anticlimactic and not badass enough, at least to the MCU standards. So they hired somebody to come in and fix it up. I myself really enjoyed the fight scenes, but you can clearly see where one director's vision of filming a fight scene ended and somebody more competent came in and cleaned up the remainder of that said fight scene. Like, it'll start off like super shaky cam, and then out of nowhere it'll cut and it'll go to a more wide cam and it's not shaky, and you actually get to see all the action play out in a very beautiful way. You can clearly see that the original director didn't know how to film action, so they had to kind of tag team it with another director to like at least make them better. And as much as I thoroughly enjoyed the fight scenes, you could feel the jumbledness of it. I don't think most people are going to notice it. The people I were with didn't notice it, but as somebody that is a filmmaker myself and a cinematographer, I was able to notice it. So although I don't think it's a terrible thing, again, it is noticeable to those who are looking out for it. Now with the bad out of the way, let's get the good in there. I loved the story of this film. I loved that we kind of steered away from the alien invasions and we need to save the planet from nuclear destruction, from an alien threat, from this, from that, and it was just like a more grounded political thriller. I love movies that are grounded in the MCU, movies like The Winter Soldier, movies like the first Ant-Man. And the fact that they went in this direction in this film, it was kind of already set up for me to like it, at least somewhat, because I just love that political thriller genre. And I thought they nailed it with the twists and turns. I didn't know who was good, who was bad. I couldn't figure out who was causing this, and when I did, I wanted to know what their motivation was and why they were doing it. And I thought that it was all really well thought out. Like I said, I thought the action, when it kicked into the second director that knew what he was doing, was really top notch. It was really fun seeing this version of Captain America fight the way he does, whereas in Steve Rogers was able to take more hits and he was able to throw more devastating punches. Sam Wilson doesn't have the super soldier serum, so he has to kind of utilize anything in his environment to make sure he wins whatever fight he's in. In the very opening of the movie, there is a scene where Sam Wilson is fighting like 10 dudes and he drops in and starts beating up some of them with hand-to-hand combat. But after dropping like 3 or 4 guys, he starts to get overwhelmed by the other 6 because he's not that strong. So yeah, he knocked out a couple, but there's still 5 other guys and now he's exhausted. So he winds up picking up like a cinder brick and bashing it over a dude's head, and he starts utilizing his environment and he starts utilizing his wings more to like dodge out of attacks. And it was just a really creative way to establish a new Captain America and their fighting stance. I thought it was really exciting every time he got a chance to shine in the action chops. I also really loved the jet set piece that you see in the trailers around the Celestial. I thought that it was really enticing and it was really intense, and it was really cool seeing how this Captain America can go aerial and take on literal fighter jets, whereas in Captain America, Steve Rogers was more grounded. He couldn't really do stuff like that. I thought the ending fight scene between Captain America and the Hulk was also really good. I, for the life of me, could not figure out how they were going to justify a human being in a metal suit taking on the Hulk. Now, some would argue that Iron Man did it in Avengers Ultron, but Tony Stark was a super genius and made a suit with the capabilities of withstanding something like the Hulk's punches. And yes, Sam Wilson here has a vibranium suit, but he is still just a man in a thin layer. It's not under all of that metal that Tony Stark was able to kind of hide behind. And the fight was so exciting, and I think it's mainly because we finally were able to get back to that angry rage Hulk. And that entire last 15 minutes was like peak MCU for me. It was so much fun. Shove popcorn in your face. See Harrison Ford as this Red Hulk just hulking the F out, pummeling Captain America, while all Captain America was trying to do was get everyone else to safety and buy them time by essentially allowing himself to get beat up by the Hulk. And then the way the fight concludes, I'm like, that was really smart. The way he defeats the Hulk is really smart, and they didn't overreach and try and make Sam Wilson essentially Thor taking on the Hulk. They did it in a way that I thought was earned. So yeah, I really enjoyed the story. I loved all the fight scenes. I loved Harrison Ford as the Hulk. Look, listen guys, Harrison Ford for the past couple years, outside of Shrinking, has really been hamming it up. He's kind of starting to enter that Bruce Willis phase where he's just doing things for a paycheck, but it all started with Shrinking, where I kind of saw like he actually genuinely likes this role because he's trying to act. In this, I know that his grandchildren really love the MCU, and that was probably a driving force for him to want to be in this and have fun and really act his heart out as this Hulk. And you could see that he is having the time of his life, and he's actually acting so good here. He was such a standout. This movie isn't just a Captain America movie, it's also a spiritual sequel to The Incredible Hulk, the one with Edward Norton, where they're kind of tying up loose ends in that. Now, for a lot of people that haven't seen it or maybe saw it a long time ago but don't remember it, it's not like you need to have remembered it to enjoy this movie. It's just little things that are going to go over your head that don't really affect the overall movie-going experience. But if you do remember the events of that Incredible Hulk film, it's like a nice little treat for you here, where you're kind of getting, like I said, a lot of loose ends from that film tie-up. But at the end of the day, this really is a Captain America and Thunderbolt Ross movie. They get equal amount of screen time. When you're not watching Captain America, you're watching Thunderbolt Ross kind of go through what he's going through at the White House and how he's like navigating all these countries kind of about to go to war over this Celestial and over this adamantium, and it's really intense and really exciting. The new Falcon, I forgot his name, not because I don't like him, but just because I just don't remember his name. He was really fun to watch. I saw a lot of people complaining that like he kind of was like a little over the top and annoying, but I thought he was endearing as like a young up and coming Falcon that really looks up to Sam Wilson. He wanted to follow in his footsteps since he was a little kid, and he has a really nice, endearing character arc towards the end of this film. But the standout here, guys, it's Sam Wilson, it's Captain America, it's Anthony Mackie. He carries this movie on his shoulders. He is incredibly charismatic. I don't care what anybody says. And by the end of this film, in my opinion, I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, but in my opinion, he fully earned the title of Captain America. A lot of people don't think he could be Captain America because he can't punch a brick wall in half the way that Steve Rogers was able to, where you can't punch a punching bag off of the chain that it's dangling on and across the room. But that's not what Captain America is. Captain America is a symbol of what we as Americans should strive to be. He's noble, he's honest, he's loyal. He is 100% a leader by the end of this movie. Sure, he can't punch Thanos in the face, but he could rally a bunch of other people, a bunch of other heroes behind them, and help lead them on the path to victory with his mind, with his nobility, with his honor. He could definitely assemble the Avengers, and I could definitely see him leading Avengers Secret Wars and Avengers Doomsday. They did a great job over the course of Falcon and Winter Soldier and Captain America Brave New World, really establishing him as the new Captain America, because leaving Falcon and Winter Soldier, it was a little, I don't know, can he pull this off? But by the end of this movie, I really think they did. He nailed it. I love him in this role now. I love Steve Rogers. Captain America is Steve Rogers is Captain America is Steve Rogers, like John Campea always says. But as a spiritual successor, as the person that Steve Rogers trusted to hand the shield off to, I think Anthony Mackie more than proves himself worthy here. There are some fun cameos in this film that kind of drive that home, where Sam Wilson is kind of feeling down on himself, and some familiar faces kind of show up to kind of let him know, like, hey, we believe in you. You are the new Captain America. And that kind of was just like the stamp on the envelope. It was the icing on the cake for me, where I was just like, that's it. I will follow you into the gates of hell if that's where you wanted to lead me, Sam Wilson. So what did I think about this movie? I really enjoyed it. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a fantastic movie, because you can see that it was tampered with a lot in the edit bay, but I think for the amount of stuff they had to go through to get this movie to the point where it's at, I think it's at least really good. I'm going to give this movie a 7.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. It's gotten me really excited for where the MCU is going in the future. There is a post-credit scene at the end of this film that I don't think is like insanely important. They're kind of just telling you something that you already know about the future of the MCU, and if you know the titles of the next two Avengers films, you know where it's going. But here, they give you a live representation of it happening, thing where two characters are talking and somebody pretty much says, I know that this thing is coming. So it kind of just solidifies it like, yeah, it's finally happening. And it's exciting, but I don't think it's something you necessarily need to wait to the end for. It's not gonna rock your socks off or blow you away. It's, again, just telling you something you already know. So anyway, guys, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Did I give you a reason to go to see this movie this weekend? If I have, let's talk about it. If I haven't, let's talk about it. And as always, guys, I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll catch you next time.